Good evening. Happy 5th of July. And I'd like to call the regular City Council meeting to order. Will the clerk do the roll call, please?
Councilmembers Hanna, Grunmeyer, Bash,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hoffman, Mayor Newton.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. We'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Mayor Pro Tem Hoffman, and then if you would remain standing for the invocation by Pastor Robert Fonseca.
Time for the nation. We just celebrated yesterday's birthday.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll have the invocation by Mayor Pro Tem Hoffman.
Dear Heavenly Father, guide us in our decisions. Help us in finding our public safety.
Amen. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
We'll now have a presentation by Riverside County Fire, CAL FIRE. Chief, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council members, staff, and residents. This evening, we'd like to do a brief overview of our thermal imaging camera. Last year, the city was able to purchase 2 replacement cameras for engine 57 and engine 47. And it's a critical piece of equipment, so we just want to show you a short video about it, and then I'm going to pass the camera around while the video is going so you can look through it yourself and see what we see. It's the number one thing we use it for is search and rescue for victims inside of a structure fire. Obviously, you know it's a very dark, very hot environment. Young children like to hide from us. They go into closets, under beds, anywhere to avoid and not be scared. So with these cameras, we can see through the smoke, we can see through the heat, we can see hidden fires, we can see really like there's no smoke in the room at all. We also use them to find hidden fire inside structures. We used to just come in, figure out kind of where it's hot, and start tearing things apart. Well, with this, we can pinpoint it, eliminating much of the damage to the home. And you'll see that in the video. And lastly, we use it for victim search. A lot of times we go out to traffic collisions at night where there's brush and shrubs, and et cetera, so we can actually scan through the bushes and find victims that we ordinarily wouldn't find. So with that, I'm going to start this video and pass around the camera.
The Evolution 6000 thermal imaging cameras are MSA's newest generation of TICs. While the life-saving features on these models vary, as you will see, they are indispensable tools on the fire ground. Outside, the Evolution 6000 is used for size-up. It is ideal for finding isolated hotspots and fire extension.
Be advised, you still have fire in the Charlie Delta corner.
This allows firefighters to make an informed approach and tackle fires with increased safety. It also reveals areas of heat accumulation, allowing possible ventilation points to be assessed. This newest generation TIC provides a patent-pending compass for faster operation and improved situational awareness in low visibility environments. The patented dual-handled design allows for easy handoff.
Let's go like right where the laser is.
And the laser pointer can be used to highlight hotspots for fast, specific action. The standard flashlight provides extra visibility for firefighter proximity and enhances safety through situational awareness. The optional rangefinder replaces the flashlight and also permits faster, more precise action. The Evolution 6000 is NFPA compliant and has a tough, waterproof and shock-resistant housing. Its high-definition visual display provides the user with 6 color palette options and the 2x or 4x zoom if equipped. An option includes integrated video and picture capture. These images are saved in the camera and are available for download onto a computer for future review and training. The design team at MSA had 2 goals in mind. Take the user experience to a new level and offer the best TIC on the market. MSA is pleased to offer this life-saving tool to all first responders. The Evolution 6000 is tested and ready for many years of reliable service. Find out more about Evolution 6000 thermal imaging camera models and their options at msaevolution6000.com.
So I hope, as you can see, it's a very useful tool for us. And I'd like to thank Andy and Brian for making it a priority last year to upgrade both of these cameras. Our previous cameras are about 12 years old, and with anything with technology, it just, as soon as you buy it, they're outdated. So as you can see, that camera's been in service about a year, and it's pretty worn already because it gets used pretty much every time we're called out to a structure fire. So again, thank you to the city and council and the residents for making public safety a priority.
Thank you, Chief. Any council members have any questions for the chief? I do.
Yes, sir.
Is there a maximum distance that this device can be used?
For inside of a structure fire, obviously it'd be about as far as you can see with walls. It won't see
Okay.
through walls. It'll see into walls to let us know what the temperature changes. As you saw in the video, you couldn't even tell there was fire in that wall until they looked at it and then opened it up. Outdoors, we could typically see about 300 feet and notice temperature changes. We've used it on the bluffs, looking down the river bottom to see campfires, and they stand out because of that glow. It's essentially the same technology as what's mounted on the bottom of a police helicopter. It's just mounted in our hand.
Is there a temperature involved for that to register? And where I'm going with this also is, could this be something NARC could use in conjunction?
If it was needed, typically there's already an engine company there. But absolutely, I mean, you just call for the engine if it's not with you, and it'll be with you, and we'll make it happen.
Okay.
Yep, if you need it in the river bottom at night to try to locate a horse and rider, it's why the engine's part of the response. We'll have it there.
All right.
And it's every once in a while we get called out by the sheriffs as well to borrow the camera and give a hand when they look for somebody or something. So it gets all aspects of use in the city.
Good. Thank you, Chief. Anyone else? Okay, staying with presentations, City Manager, Andy?
Yes, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce you to our newest management intern from WRCOG, Mr. Victor Pacheco. As you know, over the last year through WRCOG fellowship program, we received an intern who provided services to the city at no cost for 1,000 hours a year. This year, we are lucky to have Mr. Pacheco, who is our newest graduate fellowship intern from WRCOG. Mr. Pacheco is a graduate of UC Riverside. Prior to coming to work for the city of Norco, he has had previous public sector experience. Particularly, he has worked with the county supervisor, Ken Jeffrey's office. He has also worked in the city of Riverside Department of Veterans Affairs as well as worked for Secretary of State Alex Pacheco's office, Alex Padilla, office. We're happy to have him, and we're looking forward to certainly giving him a loss of assignments over the next 12 months. And the last one we had, it was worthy experience for both the city and the intern. And we're lucky to report too that after doing his internship here in the city, he was able to secure a job with Amazon. We'll be looking forward to helping Mr. Pacheco spruce up his resume, and hopefully that can lead to something better for him in the future as well.
Well, welcome. Do you have a few words?
Yes, my name is Victor Pacheco. I'm a recent graduate from UCR. I'm a transfer from community college in Northern California, Solano Community College. And then I transferred to UC Riverside, where I was under the mentorship of the very remarkable and great Mayor Ron Loveridge. And under his stewardship, I was just really able to carve out my path in public service and kind of narrow what I want to do.
Well, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'm a recent graduate of UCR also, and I had Ron as a teacher when he had brown hair.
Wow.
Not so recent, sir.
Yeah. We're proud of Kevin.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to City Council Communications, reports on regional boards, commissions. Kevin?
WRCOG and RCA is actually next Monday. As you know, we all went to the dinner, which I thought was very interesting, and then the next morning we had a meeting. The two biggest concerns, and Brian's on top of this, and I'm sure he's already briefed Andy, is a new housing bill that could be very detrimental to our city. That apparently is still in committee, and we haven't had a chance to talk about that yet, Andy. And then the cell tower issue, I'm not exactly sure where that's at, but again, that's another issue where we lose both of these. We will lose control as a local entity. I don't know, Andy, if you've had a chance to look at this, but maybe in the next week or so you might be able to look at them, or do you have some information on those now?
Yes, as I understand it, the SB 35, which is the affordable housing bill, was voted on June 28th and is moving forward. I'm being told by the League of California Cities that this is a very difficult bill for the cities to defeat. They are still seeking for cities to provide letters of opposition. We have drafted a letter, the city clerk today drafted a letter to be going out for the mayor's signature to go out to our representatives, Senator Roth, as well as Sabrina Cervantes, along with those that are sponsoring this bill. Again, we believe that this bill would take away local control, the ability of cities to legislate and regulate the construction of housing. Specifically, cities would be only required to provide a ministerial type approval to multi-family housing projects, and these projects would not be required to go through the CEQA process, which is required of all major projects in the state of California. So the League of California Cities is working very hard to try to defeat this bill. Even though everyone is in support of affordable housing, the general consensus from the league is this is the wrong way to go about solving the issue of lack of affordable housing in the state of California.
And then do you have any updates on the cell tower issue? I know I'm throwing your curve. I apologize.
I don't have any update other than the fact that that bill is still moving on. It has not been defeated, and that's all I know.
Well, the problem with that, of course, is that they can put them anywhere. We have no control over them, and then 40% of our parks are paid for by cell towers, and they would be able to put them on our light poles. We'd have no jurisdiction over them. Basically, they could do whatever they want, correct, Brian?
The language in the bill doesn't necessarily allow them to come on to property owned by the city, but in the public right-of-ways
Right.
where the bill is being really administered to. So for us, and it's going to be really more of the engineer RF readings where they're the most popular. If that's on one of our public facilities, I think they're still going to want to deal with us. But if they have the ability to put them through the right-of-ways and get the same effect, then they're going to cut a deal with the state if this passes.
And then I went to the senior meeting today. Once again, Brian, I really want to applaud your staff. The program you put together is fantastic. I watched a little bit of chair volleyball today, and just a very, very good program. Saturday is Seniors and Pets, which I'm sure you're all aware of. 9:30 is Jeff Anderson giving a new dog to a wounded warrior. That's usually a pretty cool, very short kind of meeting. And then, even though it's not really a committee, I attended the event at Silver Lakes this last weekend, and it was, I know there were glitches, and I've heard all about the glitches, but the truth of the matter is I thought it was a fabulous event. Apparently they sold 9,000 tickets, and most of the people, in fact, all the people I talked to except one, thought it was very positive, a great event. The biggest complaint I got was from my brother's friends who didn't know they could take their old cars out there, and they were very upset that they didn't know about it. And his whole car club would have brought 30 cars. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Ted?
Since the last council meeting, I've talked about the LAFCO and the meeting, and it was held regarding the 39 pockets of county area that's surrounded by city throughout the county. The LAFCO board has decided to go ahead and send that to ad hoc committee formation to see what they're going to do with that for future consideration. They were surprised to see that many, and the fact that a lot of them would not fall under the streamline category to get rid of. The bottom line is the county is looking at ways to disperse those areas they can't service very well to cut the cost for the county itself for public safety and for fire and services. So I'll keep an eye on the ad hoc committee and what they're going to do in their formation when they do that. Also attended the Western Riverside County Regional Wastewater Authority typical meeting. The plant is on the way to getting completed, hopefully by October, right, Chad? It's going to be done? We laugh. Okay, they got an extension to October to get it all finished. Interesting thing is, and well, I'm not going to go into it everything because, but they were reviewing existing litigation regarding the State Water Resources Control Board and the change of use petition. I just provided that information to the city manager, and I know Chad has it. But I can say hopefully that maybe in 6 months to a year, Chad, we'll have a light at the end of the tunnel on this mess. Okay, and that regards our water. And other than the Veterans Executive Committee, we appointed, we're getting some members to new members on board. I see Bill Schwab's in there. We've asked him to come in. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Wright. Yep, and Ron Warren, and we're another veteran. So we're going to put those on board. And 2 Marines. Oh my God, I'm really going to have trouble. You used to see our board. It's slightly Marine heavy. I'm not picking on you guys, okay? This little Army guy has to put up with you. But that's good. And then Brian is working on some new additions at the memorial, and I think we're going to work with the architect and try to get that presentation done to the council here probably within the next 2 or 3 months so that we can show everybody what we have planned for the Veterans Plaza. And Kevin's already said, please, if you get a chance, come out and see Jeff. He has 2 dogs he's going to give away. One on this Saturday, the 8th, and then the following Saturday on the 15th, there will be another dog. And yes, he will give it to a Marine on the 15th. Army guy, Army Ranger on this Saturday. That's it.
Thank you, Ted. Robin?
Nothing.
Nothing at all?
Nothing.
Okay. Berwin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All I have tonight is about RTA. They're going to start a new bus route August the 28th. It's going to be called Rapid Link, and it'll take people from UC Riverside through downtown to the Metrolink station in Corona with fewer stops than regular buses. And although the RTA already runs other long-distance commuter buses, this should be first along a shorter route with its own distinct bus stops. It will cut the traveling time down by about 20 minutes to get from UCR to the Corona train station, and I think the cost is $1.50, and it's a 19-mile route, and it currently carries about 7,000 riders a day, so it's going to cut down a bunch of time for everybody traveling. Also, starting in January, they're going to run a new service from downtown San Bernardino, downtown Riverside, through the Metrolink station, go to Orange County, Disneyland, Anaheim Convention, and a transit center. They're going to run it during the peak hours of the morning and afternoon, and that'll be a cost of $3 a ride. So they're trying to take as many cars off the road as they can by offering these specials. And don't forget, if you have young people, students from up through grade 12, they can ride the bus this summer for 25 cents anywhere they want to go. You can go on RTA website and find the flyer on that. They did this last year as an experiment, and it was very successful. So they did it during the holidays, and they're doing it now. And another service they offer is, I believe it's $3 to get people to go to the beach, young people to go to the beach. I believe it goes to Oceanside, so that's been a successful trip also. So because they said they get a lot of people that do child care services, and that's a cheap way for them to take the kids on a day's outing, is to go to the beach and back. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Berwin. Tomorrow evening, I have the Chino DeSalter Authority board meeting, and Chad, I have a question for you. So, did you have your meeting with Cindy Miller? And is there Cindy Miller's a project engineer for the CDA? Is there anything I need to, or we need to be aware of for tomorrow night?
Not at this time. We informed Ms. Miller about the issues and conditions with Silver Lake property restrictions, et cetera, and we'd indicated we'd give her additional information that she requested, which we've already provided. So it was really at this point she was going to go back to CDA and Western to talk about that information and tell her some of the issues that are present in their request, and they were going to get back to us.
Okay. So no surprises tomorrow night?
Not be.
Good. I appreciate that. I also want to thank Brian and your staff and Parks and Rec Commission and all of council for yesterday's trail ride and picnic in the park. You guys did a great job. Okay, let's move on to City Council consent items. Have a motion and a second. Cheryl?
Council members Hannah?
Yes.
Grunmeyer? Yes. Bash?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Newton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Go to item 4, public comments.
Mike McFarland?
Good evening, Mike.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. Mr. Bash.
That mic up to you, just there you go.
Mr. Bash, you're ready to hear from the second person that wasn't really thrilled about what went on Saturday. My problem with that wasn't anything to do with old cars. My problem was with the music. It was far too loud for far too long. Inside my house, and I'm in proximity to River Drive on the north side, and that music started at 11 a.m. and went until almost 10, and through my double pane windows, it was pretty easy to hear all that. I'm disappointed, and I understand the 9,000 tickets sold. I'm all about making money over there, and you can do that. The rodeos and the soccer and even the car thing is okay, but I would appreciate in advance that y'all maybe, when they make a dry run of, if they decide to have a band over there, that you come on this side. And I just couldn't believe it was that loud for as far away as it was. I'm being serious. You may need to have somebody come over and monitor when you're getting ready to start that and have them. I'd appreciate it if you adjusted the volume to acceptable levels for the town and for the quiet of the people that live on the north side of Norco. I'm halfway up the block on Corona, and it was very loud, and I just got stuck with it. But I couldn't believe that you said you were there, and I got that, but maybe you just didn't realize how loud that music was on the other side, and it's a good, half a mile away?
I left before bed.
Pardon me?
I left before bed.
Ah, wow, okay. I'm not, then that was my gripe, but I just came here tonight because I ask you all to consider the people that live on the north side if you want to have activities going on there that are going to include loud music from before noon until on up to quitting time at 10 o'clock, because I talked to a few neighbors and some of them just took off for the day. They got tired of hearing it, so I just thought I'd stop by tonight and tell you all, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
Bill Naylor.
Appreciate your comments. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Kind of in a position here. I attended a Planning Commission meeting here this last month, and one of the subjects at the Planning Commission was brought up, and some of the commissioners questioned whether or not the issue had ever been brought before Streets, Trails, and Utilities. Of course, it hadn't been. They questioned staff on why it wasn't brought up, and staff said, well, they did not believe it was something was necessary to be brought over to Public Works, to be brought to Streets, Trails, and Utilities. And they had a lot of concerns about the trail issue regarding this one piece of property. I would just like to encourage council and staff to really think about projects that are brought before them, to look and see whether or not it is something that the different commissions can have some input in. I was thinking in terms of what was presented at that commission meeting, and if we had had a chance to or I should say a commission has had a chance to put some additional input into it, that project might have been approved at that commission meeting, but as it was, I guess it was at least turned down at this time. But again, I just wanted to encourage staff and council to try to use the commissions as much as they possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Corinne Holder.
Good evening, Corinne.
Good evening. I just wanted to congratulations on a great event yesterday. I just want to say personally, thank you guys so much for putting the time and the effort in, because it's not just Parks and Rec, but we had council members, commissioners, different organizations there, all pitching in to make sure everyone had a great time. And I know that as a Parks Commissioner, we really appreciate your support on that kind of stuff. And the next event coming up is right around the corner, July 22nd, Day of the Cowboy. And again, we're trying to make it fun for the family members and inexpensive, something for everyone to come out and enjoy. $5 per vehicle, clown car it, make it cheap, and come and enjoy all of the Cowboy Day events. mule races, chuck wagon races, all kinds of silliness, Gymkhana events if people want to come and participate in those. And we will have some food vendors and some other fun stuff, so come out and enjoy another day in Norco. Thank you.
Thanks, Corinne.
That concludes public comments.
I have one more, if I can add. Tyler? Would you like to give us a short report so we can beat you up on SB 35 or whatever?
Anything you want.
Good evening.
I can give a quick update on the budget. So the governor signed the full budget into law about 2 weeks ago now, and there are a lot of victories in there for the region. We have 4 judgeships that are being reallocated from the Bay Area to Riverside County, San Bernardino counties. Before anyone is concerned, it's not the actual judges from San Francisco coming here, it's the position.
Okay.
So we get 2 judges, and San Bernardino County gets 2 judges. Additionally, there's going to be $100 million going toward medical residencies for lower income areas, so that'll benefit us as well. $10 million to go toward the citrus industry to fight citrus psyllid, which is pretty important to our regional economy. I think it's $10 million going to Riverside County Office of Education for online education, and also $400 million for the California Air Resources Board, which is going to be transferred from El Monte to Riverside. They expect that to open by 2019, I believe, and it's going to create a lot of jobs. Their staff is fairly top heavy, and a lot of them are going to be retiring before they come over. So we see that as an opportunity for regional employment growth, and also a multiplier effect to bring higher tech industries to the area. Yeah, and with respect to SB 35, we really appreciate the proactive input of all of our local governments. You'll always have those senators here. It passed the Senate. It's being considered in the Assembly. If you do move forward with a letter of opposition, send it over. I'll make sure that the senators sees it before he has the opportunity to vote on it again.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Okay, let's move into public hearings. Item 5A, ordinance number 1023, first reading. This will be the Director of Public Works. Chad?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Council. This item is brought to order because, as you may recall, in June, I brought before the council, and council approved a complete rehab of the water ordinance. There was a lot of outdated information in there that wasn't relevant anymore. We added a lot more information, provided clarification on a lot of different topics. Unfortunately, through my aggressiveness in trying to get this process done and clearing information, there was one definition that I did eliminate that I need to bring back into the ordinance, which is our energy pass-through charge, which is done for the zones that are the 1020 and 1280, which is basically the homes up in the hills. There's an energy pass-through charge that's done to pay for the booster pumps that push that water from the lower zone, which is our 800 zone, up to those homes up there, and that was initiated back in 2003 and started actually assessing that charge in 2004. So I just need to put back the definition so it explains what that charge is and what it's for, and that's the purpose of this ordinance change in front of you, is to add basically this definition into the definition section that clearly describes who this charge impacts. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chad. Council have any questions? I have a question. Yes, on that zone on 1230 zone, we've been charging this all along, this pass-through, correct? Is the cost just attributed to, I believe it's 280 some residents?
I don't have the numbers in each zone. I apologize for not having that here. But yes, if you're in a particular zone, which we've identified, you're charged one or another fee. So if you're in a lower zone, you pay the booster cost up to that zone. And if you're in the higher zone, you're paying those costs to get it all the way up to that zone.
Okay. So it's not that familiar with Norco Hills, but Norco Ridge, you have 3 zones. So there's varying costs for the 3 different pressure zones?
The only 2 pressure zones that have an additional cost is those homes that are we're boosting it up into the 1020 or the 1230.
Okay, yeah, a 1080. Okay, all right. Then conversely, that with that water, then you have pressure reducing. Is there any pass-through costs with pressure reducing stations?
No, because normally those are used when you're at a higher elevation and bringing it down.
Right.
That's really just a clay valve that just helps keep the pressure back. There's no real electricity involved in that.
All right, so there's no cost there?
No.
All right. Good. This is a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing.
No cards on this item.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'll close the public hearing. Bring it back for any further discussion or motion.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Norco amending Chapter 14, Section 14.04.010, definitions and summary of charges of the Norco Municipal Code, Code Amendment 2017-07.
Council members Hannah?
Yes.
Grunmeyer? Yes. Bash?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hoffman?
Yes.
Mayor Newton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That'll conclude public hearings, and we'll move into item 6, discussion action item. This is the results of the 2017 community survey. City Manager, Andy?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, before I turn this over to Rick Scholars from FM3, I'd like to make a couple of general comments. As you know, the 2016 strategic plan for the City of Norco, one of the strategic priorities in that strategic plan calls for the city to engage residents through communications and outreach. As part of that effort, the City Council and staff commissioned a community survey about 4 months ago to do essentially that, reach out to our residents and in an attempt to gather some information about their opinion regarding several issues. Number one was to try to find out residents' opinion with respect to how city government is working for them, deals with the direction of the city. Also, part of that survey surveyed residents regarding the importance of various services that the city offers and whether city residents understand some of the challenges and issues that are facing the city. Particularly when it comes to city finances and funding needs in order to continue to provide services as well as to provide for infrastructure, which has been a significant topic of discussion over the last several years. Also, in recognizing that we have funding gaps and infrastructure needs, one of the objectives of the survey was to try to find out from residents their perception in terms of potential funding ideas to meet these gaps in services and or regarding infrastructure needs. So again, as a result of that, this survey was commissioned and over a period of time, performed electronically as well as through actual telephone calls. I will let the representative from FM3, Rick, walk us through the findings of this community survey.
Good evening, City Council members.
Good evening.
Good evening. Happy to be here to present these results. I'm going to walk through some pretty detailed numbers. Happy to answer any questions as I go along. If something's confusing or you want some more information and I didn't get to it, feel free to interrupt me as we go along. So I'll just get started. I think this, let's see. No, I just turned it off. This way, okay. So just to give you sort of a briefing on how the survey was conducted, we did it via online and telephone interviews, landline and cell phones, as that is necessary these days. But most of your responses came online. We got the vast majority of people taking the survey online. So in total, we got 519 City of Norco registered voters to take this survey. Pretty good size sample for a city of your size. We usually, for a community this size, somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 to 400 interviews we would do, but there was a greater response here in this community, so a sense of desire to give their feedback, and we got a pretty robust sample out of it. You can see the survey was conducted in early April, so as the city manager said, several months ago, but I think the results they're not results that are big events are happening in the world that, one day you ask about something happening in North Korea one day, it's going to change. These are results that pretty much stay consistent, barring big changes over time. And there's just showing some margin of error issues there that happens in opinion research polls like this. Just be aware of it, about 4% as we go through. I'm going to show some demographic numbers as well. The margin of errors will be bigger for those groups because we're cutting the group in half if we say men versus women, older versus younger, and et cetera. So that preamble, get into the actual results. So just sort of starting off big picture, how do people feel about their own city, their mood, and local issues? Sort of one of the basic barometer questions we ask when we do surveys like this all throughout California for cities large and small, urban and rural, suburban, is do you think things are headed in the right direction or are they off on the wrong track? And here, I'll start at the bottom. You can see by nearly 2/3, voters in Norco think the state of California is off on the wrong track. So that's a pretty substantial margin. Statewide, these numbers are about even. If you ask all California voters right now how they feel about the state of California, it's about 45 to 50% who will say right direction, and a similar amount, maybe a little less, who will say wrong track. What's interesting here in the city of Norco is you've got a slight plurality of 44% who think the city is off on the wrong track, only 41% saying right direction. This is somewhat of an aberration from what we see in cities like yours, smaller communities in California. Typically, the smaller the community, the more positive people will have about their own city. So it is a bit different. It's not to say that there's an overwhelming negative attitude about the city, but it's just a little more sort of divided than we would typically see in a small community in California these days. Riverside County is sort of the same situation, a little more negative than positive, but you can see there's actually a lot of people, 28%, who don't really have a feel as to what the county is like, whether it's headed in the right direction or wrong track. So a little more sort of undecided about the county than the city or the state. In terms of, we asked a question of, read a bunch of issues and say, do you think this is an extremely serious problem, very serious, somewhat serious, or not a problem at all? And that dark orange is the extremely serious. And what we're always looking for in this research is intensity. If somebody thinks something's a problem, what degree is it a problem? So if they say extremely serious or very serious, we know that that's a stronger feeling as opposed to just saying somewhat serious. And what you see here is, and I think it referenced earlier this evening, is neighborhood streets conditions, city streets conditions. That is the issue of most concern in this city. About 2/3 are saying that's an extremely or very serious problem in Norco. So there's a lot of concern about the quality of roads and streets in this city among the residents. Next, sort of a second-tier issue as we come down is waste and inefficiency in city government. And you can see 1/3 of voters say that's an extremely serious problem. Now, just sort of sort of tell you to take that 33% who say extremely serious and sort of make a note of that to yourself as we go on, because thinking about potential ballot measures that we discuss in this survey, that 33% can be sort of a harbinger of things to come. But 54% say it's an extremely or very serious problem about waste and inefficiency in city government. Again, that's a relatively high number. Most cities in California these days, that's not as high a number. That we've seen that number throughout the state, for both for state government, county government, city government. As the state budget seems to be getting better, under control, we don't hear about large deficits every year. The concern about waste and inefficiency in all levels of government has sort of come down over the past several years, as it appears that we are in a better budget cycle these days. Here it's a little higher than we see elsewhere across California. Concern about the rural small character. Almost half say it's an extremely or very serious concern, but you can see we're starting to sort of fall a little, that dark orange is coming down a bit, so it's 30%, not as big a group of people saying extremely serious, but it's something in the public mindset that they want to preserve it, and I think we'll see throughout this research, preservation of this sort of unique quality of life that Norco offers is something that voters and the residents feel very strongly. They're sensitive to it, and they greatly appreciate what this community has to offer. Same, you can see sort of basically almost identical numbers with the loss of community's animal keeping way of life. Crime, a bit lower on the list, towards the bottom there. In the next slide, you can see start talking about some issues related to finances, economy, the taxes, both sort of in that 4 and 10 range of concern about taxes or the condition of local economy. Not to say it's not an issue of importance, but it's just in a different level of, it's not a top of mind issue these days. Again, thinking back of where we might have been in 2008, 2009 at the heights of the recession, this was an issue that would have been more at that 2/3 level that your streets are at right now. So sort of the economy's taken sort of a better look now. It's not as forefront in their mind. On this list, I'll just sort of point to the rate of growth and development. It's interesting that this one is at 35%, and only 14% are saying extremely serious problem. However, and I'll just flip back for a second, when we talk about the loss of rural small town character, that issue is more intense at 30%. And sometimes what we find in these surveys is the wording and how you describe something really matters to the public, and it's how you communicate issues so people understand what you're talking about. A lot of times what we find in our research is the issues that people are talking about, they don't disagree at, but they use different terms and phrases, and sometimes the meanings get lost between groups and between individuals. So people thinking of small town, rural character, that's a deeper concern than when you start talking about rate of growth and development, which for some people just doesn't provoke that concern. It means something else to them. So people sort of talking about the same thing might have different reactions. 911 response times, pretty low on the concern list, and then the quality of local parks, fields, and recreation. Obviously, I've heard tonight doing a good job, so I think that suggests people are generally pleased with those services.
Rick,
yes.
Go back one page, and I'm interested because on the waste and inefficiency in city government, that 15% of the don't know or not applicable or no answer,
right?
It's that's the highest of all that, and that's a very large number. That's based on this. So is there any explanation for that?
I think a lot of it, and there's some questions coming up that it's a good note that you're making. We'll see there's a lot of lack of knowledge about city finances today. I think people are to some extent skeptical because it's government, and people are sort of skeptical about government naturally being able to manage its resources. It may not have anything to do with the city of Norco. It may have to do with perceptions of what's going on in the federal government or what's happening in the state or even the county, and everybody gets sort of lumped in together. So you say government and people have a general perception. And in a few slides, you're going to see large numbers of people who say, I don't know, when we ask them questions about the current finances of the city. And I think this is sort of a first indication that people's knowledge may not be specific enough to really understand, but they're sort of maybe their innate perception is, well, government generally wastes money, and that's my attitude. And so if you had to push me one way or the other, I'm going to say I think they're wasteful. But they don't, when you start giving them more specific and pointed questions, they back off a little and say, I can't answer that, I don't know. So, just generally ask the question, do you approve or disapprove of the job being done by city government overall and the city council itself? And here you can see we have, roughly almost half saying the city government, they approve of the job being done, and a little less, a plurality, 46% approve of the job city council is doing. But what I would sort of caution here is it's interesting that the numbers is sort of, we use the technical term soft, that there's only 11% and 13% respectively saying they strongly approve of the city government and city council. And again, I think this gets to the point where people are sort of saying, I have general opinions, but I don't know enough to really make a real strong decision or indication of a feeling of intensity. And that's, again, what we're always looking for in these surveys is a degree of intensity. We saw that with roads and condition of roads, that they have a strong feeling. Here, they're not expressing an intense, strong feeling. So there's a sort of a lot of gap of, maybe I feel this way, but I'm not going to hold myself down and say strongly. And again, we've got over 10% for both saying don't know, I can't really answer that question. The next one, we asked more about the specific public safety departments, and this is pretty much in line with what we see in our research throughout, communities. People greatly appreciate the work of their public safety first responders, and, firefighters can always hold it over the police, the sheriffs. The firefighters always get a little higher than the police and sheriffs do. But by and large, these are extremely positive numbers. You can see here the dark orange is a strongly disapprove on this bar on these graphs, and you can see very little dark orange, meaning people are strongly disapproving. So public safety is well regarded in this community. A few items about sort of this unique community within sort of the greater, Los Angeles Inland Empire region, and what it offers to the residents of the city. And I think there is this recognition that Norco really is a unique, special place with its own characteristics that define it. So people's recognition of the large lots that allows them this animal keeping lifestyle. You see 89% agree with that statement. 64% say it's very accurate. So people know what they have in this city, they recognize it, and they greatly value it, how it helps with their property values. It offers a higher quality of life. You've got more than 8 in 10 saying those statements are accurate, that what this community offers benefits residents. Very few people disagree or say these statements are inaccurate. So getting into the city finances. So the one thing that the public really is sure about and knows about is that their water and sewer rates have gone up recently. You can see here on this, 64% say that is a very accurate statement. In total, 80% say it is accurate, only 7% saying inaccurate, and 13% can't give an answer. So when it comes to personal finances, people are very sensitive and knowledgeable and have strong opinions. The next 3 bars on this page sort of show the opposite when it comes to city finances, which is a lot of people are not sure about what's happening in City of Norco finances. So when we ask, most of the property taxes that Norco residents pay go to the county and public schools, not the city. Almost half, 47%, say, I don't know. I can't say whether it's an accurate or inaccurate statement. Just 16% are very sure that that's an accurate statement. So there's a big gap of awareness and knowledge there. Similarly, city government has enough money to maintain current service levels without raising taxes. Almost 4 in 10 are saying, I don't know. Only 14% are saying that's very accurate and 11% very inaccurate. So only 1 in 4 have a strong opinion about that statement. So a lot of people saying, I don't know, or I think this way, but I'm not exactly sure that that's true. Similarly, 4 in 10 are unable to give a sense of whether it's accurate that the city has contracted the size of the city workforce, has implemented fiscal reforms to reduce expenses. Again, just a lack of ability to say, is that an accurate or inaccurate statement? And while, I think what the city manager sort of introduced this presentation in sort of shows this survey quantifies a lot of what you may have been sensing and feeling as the city leaders, and it sort of suggests that there is a gap between what's happening in City Hall and what the public understands and why there is that gap. So there's certainly a need and a desire for people to get this information and have a better sense of what is and is not happening here. These numbers sort of show similar things. A lot of people just can't really give a strong indicative answer of whether or not city finances are in a good shape or in a poor shape, what's happening with them, whether the city has an emergency reserve fund that's in good health. So there's a lot of, I don't want to call it ignorance, but it's a hard issue for people to register. Maybe, these are sort of technical issues that people are not really following on a day-to-day basis, and it's just a tough thing for people to know when there's so much information in our lives today getting thrown at us. The one thing on here that is a bit concerning is the second bar down, which is the statement, residents can trust city government to be truthful about Norco's finances. And right now that number is nearly 2-to-1 that is an inaccurate statement. A slight majority, 51%, say that's inaccurate, and you can see 31% are saying very inaccurate. So there is this concern about whether the city government is trustworthy, that if you provide this information, whether the public's going to trust it. So that there seems to be a bit of a skepticism about information coming from the city as well. So that sort of creates a dual problem of not only aren't sure of what's happening here, but they're a little skeptical again. And again, this may just be normal sort of overall sort of skepticism and dubiousness of city and government in general. Nothing Norco specific, but feeling, can we really trust the government at large? So we did test a few ballot measures. Just want to go through those quickly. The first measure we tested, here's the text of it, and it was written in conjunction with the city attorney to make sure it's legally permissible, and it adheres to the law of what a ballot measure must do. And this one is known as a special purpose measure. It requires 2/3 support from the public, and it would dedicate all of the money to the city's infrastructure, which includes repairing streets, maintaining, upgrading trails, parks, and other public facilities. And so it's a 1-cent sales tax, as you can see in the language. It would generate nearly $4.5 million a year, requires certain accountability and oversight provisions. So the respondents either heard this read to them over the phone or they read it online for themselves, and they were asked to vote. And the results show a majority, 56 in total, vote yes on it, but that's far below the 2/3 threshold needed to pass this type of measure. And I told you earlier sort of that 33% to lock that away. Here you have 33% voting definitely no. That's a pretty large definite no number, particularly thinking about a 2/3 measure. That basically means anyone who's not a definite no for this to pass would have to vote yes. And that's just not the typical thing that would happen over the course of this type of survey. So in addition to testing this type of measure, we did what is known as a general purpose measure, and that only requires a simple majority of 50% plus 1. And this measure would fund all types of city services. So that's public safety, road repairs, senior services, parks, recreation, anything the city generally funds from its general fund could be used. And again, it was a 1-cent sales tax, same amount raised, same mandatory accountability provisions included, and we asked them to vote on this. And generally similar numbers, just over half voting yes. It's worth noting that sort of undecided lean yes, which pushes you over the 50% mark, those are respondents who initially say, I don't know, I'm not sure, and then we sort of ask them again, well, if the election was today and you had to vote yes or no, how would you vote? So 4% said they'd lean yes, 2% say they lean no. But again, this sort of shows the the margin is not very large for this type of measure, at least initially when we first present it to the public. Just give you a sense of demographically what some of these numbers look like for this general purpose measure. Women are a little more supportive than men, and that's pretty typical in these types of surveys. Women seem to be a little more willing to support these types of measures than men do on average. By party affiliation within the city, this too conforms with what we see typically at local ballot measures. Democrats are going to be the most likely to vote in favor. Independents fall somewhere in between the Democrats and Republicans are going to be the most difficult to convince. But here, almost half of Republicans are voting in favor, and it's worth noting this is obviously a significant majority of the city's electorate. 58% of the sample and registered voters in the city are Republicans. And Republicans are typically, tax averse, fiscally conservative, but typically local measures, Republicans, where they might vote no at the state level or the county level, sometimes at the city level they will be supportive because if I'm going to pay taxes, I want it to go to my roads because I want to get my roads fixed, or I want it to go to my local firefighters or my local sheriff's deputies. So there is sometimes a little more support among Republicans at the local level than you'll see for other statewide types of measures. Age-wise, sort of interesting. We typically see it most supportive at the youngest end of the age spectrum and sort of come down. Here, it's interesting that the two sort of opposite groups, the voters under the age of 30 and those over the age of 75, are the most supportive of this measure. So it's sort of the millennials and the seniors are the ones voting in favor at the highest rates in Norco. Based on how long people have been living in the city, it's interesting. The newest residents, so people who have been here less than 5 years, they're at 2/3 support. So they're the strongest supporters. And then you can see, they're sort of in the mid-50s for people who've been here 6 to 30 years. And then the longest term residents are evenly split on this measure. So in addition to testing the measure as a whole package, we sort of said, okay, here's a bunch of different ways that this measure could be structured, both in terms of what provisions would be required and how funds could be used. And we asked people to rate their importance, whether that is an extremely important, very, somewhat, or not too important element of the ballot measure, a provision, or a use of funding. And what's interesting on this first slide, these are the most important things, and what you can see here is a clear antipathy towards Sacramento and state government. 74% say it is extremely important to them that if we're going to pass this local Norco tax, Sacramento can't touch it at all. So that is something, and it's, hearing the council speak about the League of Cities earlier tonight, we do research for the League of Cities as well, and we found this local authority, local control theme, something that is very important to the public. It crosses all party lines. People want decisions made in their community about their daily lives. So that's something that, while not surprising to see at the top of the list, the intensity in this city is much higher than we see in a lot of other places. But then right underneath that, you can see right back where we started, roads, fixing the roads, getting the streets in order. That's all at the top of the list. Over 80% extremely or very important. So it's quite clear what matters to this community. Fixing the roads. They see that as the problem, and that's what they want dealt with. Right underneath that, you can see protecting open space from development. Again, that concern was sort of voiced to a certain extent up front when we asked about problems. People are a little nervous about the way things are going. Are we losing our rural character, our special, unique city, what it looks like? So preserving open space, something people want. And then public safety is naturally, in all communities, a high degree of importance. And then some other provisions regarding fiscal oversight or accountability, the length of the tax, how it should be local control. So there's just a number of facets that people support here at high levels. Going to the next page, you can see, again, a lot of different things here, but a lot of them look similar. I think one of the things that came up in this survey, and you can see here, is and we'll see a few when we test it later, the word maintaining comes up a bunch as being one of the stronger when these numbers are testing higher. And I think what happens in a community like this, where people generally like what they have and they want to preserve the community as is, even if they think some things are wrong with it, In a place that isn't doing as well, the word improving or upgrading might be better suited to that type of community. Here, maintaining. You like what you have. We like our city as is. We want to maintain that. So maintaining firefighter, paramedic staffing levels, maintaining the deputy stations. So all of those generally test pretty well. You can see over 2/3 saying extremely or very important. In comparison, just at the top of this list, increasing the number of on-duty sheriff's deputies. So when we start talking about adding on, increasing traffic safety programs, the numbers come down a little bit. The extremely important is now under 30%, and that extremely and very important has fallen in the mid-50s for those two. But when we go back to something like maintaining the city's reserve fund used to respond to economic downturn, natural disasters, or a major emergency, the intensity is a little still down, but we get more people saying it's a very important use. So we're back in the mid-60s. So this idea of maintaining the sort of way the measure is communicated really does matter here. And then just, one more last line, and you can see some of the items here just a little, I think, not that to say that they are things that should be cut or even gotten rid of, but in sort of hierarchy of what is important, the roads, public safety, all those things sort of come first. And then you can see here, with less intensity on the extremely important are things like the trail system or the fields and playgrounds or equestrian facilities. So they're just, not to say that they are unimportant, but they just are not as intensely important at this time to voters. So I do want to just sort of briefly go through some educational outreach statements that sort of helped voters to understand what the city is facing. So we presented a number of statements, and I don't want to take up time by reading all of these. And basically, in that parenthetical in each of these statements, it's a thematic of what that statement was. So the first statement on this list, when we say Horsetown, it's about the uniqueness of the city, how it's different and special, and how people choose to come here because of what it offers, and that preserving that's important. Response times is about the importance of investing in 911 services and making sure firefighters, sheriff's deputies can all get to people in a quick amount of time when necessary. The infrastructure, the need to invest money in fixing roads, upgrading various facilities that the city relies upon. Accountability, the built-in requirements to make sure funds are used as promised, go to the services that people are told they're being used for. Sales tax, this is about the investments the city's made and some of the, there's a new equestrian facility. You heard 9,000 people came, so people from all over the region are coming here. When they come here, if we have a higher sales tax, they're going to pay their fair share. They come here, they use our resources, they drive on our roads. They should, give us a little money so we can pay for the public safety or to repave the roads every few years when it needs to be done. Explaining how the city budget's divided and that public safety is making up the biggest piece of it. And then finally, this fiscally responsible statement that the city has been taking a proactive approach, cutting its expenses, reducing the amount of money it spends on staffing, being more efficient, and negotiating better contracts with employees to make sure taxpayers are not being overburdened and that money goes to services rather than non-services. So we read all those statements, and for each one we asked them, is this a very convincing or somewhat convincing reason to support investments, making an investment in the city? And this Horsetown concept of a unique city is clearly, by all indication, the strongest and most persuasive and most compelling reason for this community. And when we test these statements, what we're often looking for is a statement that sort of hits that 40% very convincing, and that here we're at 45% very convincing. And so that tells us that this statement resonates with your public. People hear it and they go, that makes sense to me. After hearing that, I think I understand why the city's talking about this type of this idea. The other statements, not to say that they're ineffective, they just don't sort of have that, I guess, pop is how I would describe it, that really says to somebody who doesn't know about these issues to say, okay, now I'm convinced. But they're good, strong statements. The response time issues, infrastructure, accountability are all solid educational statements to sort of explain to the public what the city's trying to do, what it's going through. I think one of the things that's also worth noting, and I talked about this earlier, the fiscally responsible statement. You can see that's the lowest on the list. And what again that suggests there is something's happening between the city and the community that these claims of fiscal responsibility people are a little dubious of, and they're just sort of pushing that at arm's length and saying, I don't know. I just don't know about that, whether they can believe those claims the city has made. So we read those statements and sort of trying to simulate what the city could do over time, communicating and educating. And so we asked the general purpose measure again, just to see if anyone would change their mind or vote differently. And what we see here is there's not a fundamental change. We still have a majority voting yes, but the people who are really, where we're seeing change are those lean yes people, which started at 4% and now is at 7% after those statements. And what it suggests is it's still a hard sell for people in this community to support a tax. And I think that's not surprising given the demographic makeup of this community. It's going to always be a challenge. You still have 30% who are definitely no, and that may be just a philosophical approach they have that they don't believe in higher taxes. That is just their personal belief. And statements may matter and sound good, but they don't buy into it. And we did go through a series of arguments against to present the other side, and a lot of those are, related to taxes. The recent increase in the state sales or gas tax that was put into place by the new budget. Other taxes that were passed last year in the statewide election, concerns that we hear in a lot of communities about pensions and other issues. Maybe the city spending money on private sector investments brought in economic development, but was that the best use of money? So we presented that, and we go through that to sort of simulate the opposition, what people who oppose this kind of thing would say. And you can see it does. It pulls support back down, and you're right at 50% for this type of measure after people hear sort of the back and forth exchange of why this is a good idea and a bad idea. So there's definitely a tough thing for this community to see where they should end up on this type of measure. I don't think it's, in a lot of communities, there's various ones that are definite, they're going to pass, you can't say anything against it, people are going to support it, and the opposite is true in other communities where no matter what you say, nobody's going to vote for it. Here, people are moving around, they're saying, well, there's some good points there, I need information, I don't really understand all the issues at play, maybe there's some things I haven't heard. So happy to take some additional questions if you have any.
Thank you. I have one question.
Sure.
Well, to start with, on your page 5, and this was at the rate of growth and development. And then I'm going to take you to page 21. Okay. And what I'm looking for is the nexus between the two there, if there is one. So we look at the rate of growth and development, 35%, serious problem. And then go to on page 21. Make sure I got it correct. Protecting open space from development. Is there something between the two there that...
I mean, I think that the concern about open space and development, I think there's a group of people who may feel it for whatever reason that they see something happening they don't like. But I think across the community, there is an appreciation for this city's open space and the idea that a lot of people came here intentionally, grew up here or moved here intentionally because it offers a certain lifestyle. And part of that is access to open space and what that affords. And I think just sort of maybe going back also to statements, which is this understanding or this sense of this is what this city, there's something about this city that's unique and different, and open space plays a big part of it. It gives us the opportunity to have this animal keeping lifestyle. It gives us large lots that are great for property values, and you can't find this type of these types of open space properties in many other places in Southern California at this point. So it has a special place for a lot of residents.
You see where I'm trying to go with that, which you're correct with that assumption. But at the same time, it's trying to develop that certain growth and development. And I'm trying to find out how you try to balance that.
I mean, I guess my perspective is
that's our challenge.
I don't come here to tell you how to do your job, but I would say part of this, and I think the city manager led off by saying, you had a strategic plan, and you say you need to start having more of a dialogue between the government and the community, and in no way is this survey the beginning and end of it. It's just the first part of it where it says, okay, here's some quantifiable data you have. People know X, Y, and Z to a certain extent. On this page, there's high numbers saying things about open space, large lots, property values. They all get that. They like that. How do we sort of communicate back and forth, public and the city government, to explain why that's a great thing, but some of the challenges that may go along with it when it comes to making investments in fixing our roads? What role do the large lots have when we go and try to fix our roads? How do those two things what is the interconnection between those two things that, you're not advocating for one thing or another, just so the public understands, you as the policymakers, what decisions you're being asked to make and how you go about trying to do your jobs for the public.
And I had one other question on the sample ballot measures, and there's a statement in both of,
let's see if I can,
whether it's specific or general, until ended by voters.
So,
and then you had made a comment further. I think you used a 8 or a 9 year a parameter in a general purpose. Can that, or would you think it maybe would increase the percentage of approval to say, instead of until ended by voters, can you put a time limit in that? On a general?
So when we tested this, here at the bottom of the list is the 9 years, which 61% say is an extremely or very important aspect of it. And then I believe it is a little farther down. I got to find it. We may have not tested the until ended by voters specifically. Did I miss it somehow? Oh, there it is. Yeah, so 60%. So they're not too different. There's a little more intensity on the 9 years. I would say I guess the way I typically look at those numbers is, and it may go back to the sort of place the vote, which is those undecided voters. If there's somebody who's sort of saying, I want to know more. How does this work? When's, I pay tax for how long? When's it going to go away? Those types of people who are looking, don't have a strong opinion yet, they may be the ones who could be persuaded on those types of things. So, it's obviously a concern for voters have if you pass something. Am I going to pay this forever? What's sort of what's going on here type thing. So it matters to some people for sure.
Okay, thank you. Berwin, any questions?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good report. My question was on the 9 years. If it went on the ballot, would we put a time limit on it, or what?
I think that is sort of you as a city council make that determination ultimately how you want to structure this measure from should it be specific amount or specifically dedicated to certain types of services, public safety, or should it go into the general fund so you as the city council can say, look, one year we may need to fund roads a lot, but the next year something happens and we got to put it into public safety. So it's all sort of, and I think that's, again, that goes through sort of having this interaction with the community, saying what do you as the community think we should be doing, and then you as the council trying to weigh all those decisions and make what you think is the best policy for the city and its future.
Well, in your opinion, if this did go on the ballot, would it be better to put a time limit on it, give the people a choice to?
So I do think in the context of what we're talking about right now, yes, probably some degree of having a sunset of 9. I don't know if 9 years is the right year, 15, should it be more, should it be less, should it be 5, I don't know. Don't have a strong opinion on that right now. But I think for some voters here, if the communication goes forward and they start to understand, okay, we're in a situation right now where the city's facing some challenges. But I want to see after an investment over time that the city did what they were going to say. And if they don't, I shouldn't continue to pay this tax maybe. But so for some people saying, okay, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt for the next 9 years for sake of argument. I want to see what happens after 9 years. If this comes up again and you've done a good job and I think it was a good investment, we'll continue to support it.
Okay, so if it went, say example, it went on the ballot and passed with that 9-year clause on there, it would have to run the full 9 years. The council couldn't take it off before the 9 years is up, or would that be going for the voters? If the voters put it on there, the voters would have to be the one to take it off before the deadline, wouldn't they?
I'm going to let the city attorney handle that one.
Generally speaking, since you're collecting a tax, that if you sunset it sooner, that isn't a problem. Obviously, you can't extend it beyond whatever the ballot measure indicated. I mean, essentially, what you're saying, like with any other tax, that, well, we're not going to take it.
But what I'm saying, though, if the voters approved it for 9 years, it has to stay for 9.
No, and what I'm saying is no. That, I mean, in the sense that the language of the initiative or the ballot measure wouldn't change. So literally it's available for 9 years. But it's kind of like the Norco Ridge Ranch landscape and lighting district. You could theoretically say, we don't want to collect this anymore and not collect it, because you have to take some formal action on an annual basis to levy the taxes anyway. So theoretically, if you wanted to sunset it sooner, you could do that. My expectation is that in real life that's probably not going to happen.
Well, I was just thinking if the people approved it for 9 years, it wouldn't be right for the council to stop it sooner than the
it ends up being a council decision. It's not really a legal decision particularly, but it's a council decision.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I have a couple questions. Several of the slides talk about a split sample. Can you discuss what that is real quick?
So the split sample is merely, in the course of the survey, half of the respondents got put randomly into one group to ask certain questions, and the other half got asked other questions. Really what it is about is we had a lot of material to cover, and people don't want to necessarily be on the phone or online for too long, and we got to try to get them through the survey because sooner or later they're going to stop participating. So to try to make this less onerous for the respondent, some questions will say, okay, only half of the people are going to get, just so we're not keeping people on the phone for 45 minutes.
Okay, and so the margin of error still stays the same, correct?
Well, when we start breaking it up, so questions, so for example, a number, like on this slide, so there's the third line down, which says fixing deteriorating neighborhood streets. That was asked of all respondents. Everything else on this page was actually split sampled. So the margin of error would be a little higher for everything else. The fixing deteriorating neighborhood streets is actually going to be a lower margin of error.
Okay. All right, so then my next question is on slide number 28.
Okay.
So you talk about the themes and very convincing and somewhat convincing. And one thing I've noticed, maybe this is just Norco, but I appreciate the fact that if we look at the two spectrums, like very convincing or not convincing on the two ends, that people, for the most part, have kind of an intensity for or a passion either for or against particular items. Was there a high level of intensity on the not convincing part for most of these, or were people kind of wishy-washy?
Not really. There's a category where we can say somewhat very, not too, and that's sort of what we offer. Then some people will say, I don't believe that statement. And that last one, I don't have it on there, but I think that one had a higher don't believe. And what's sort of what we found over the years in research is when people don't believe something, that is more of a sort of having a negative impact than if they just say it's not convincing. I tell you something and you just say, that doesn't work for me. That's not going to be as problematic as somebody saying, I don't believe what you're telling me.
Okay. All right. That's it.
Back on pages 10 and 11, I guess I'm really curious about the educational part of this. And what bothers me is what people don't know and or have no opinion, or they just no answer. The 47% on the second question, the 38 and the 39, and then of course on page 11, the 61%, and on the reforms in the 58%. And I don't know if you have the breakdown. Is that age specific where they don't know, or is it one group or another?
I think because I don't have those numbers at hand with me right now. Oops, sorry. But particularly for these two, the 61 and 58, that's such a large number that presumably crosses all demographic groups. When you get to those larger numbers, it's not going to be one group or another. It's going to be sort of consistent across the sample. For the others, on this page, as I recall, it might be more. There's sort of a combination of it, which is, I think, newer residents who are just maybe don't have the historical perspective, and, I just moved here, I'm not as familiar with what's going on. They may not know as much. And then I think a lot of it actually starts breaking down along, we didn't ask this because it's certainly not, sort of in the scope of this research, which is, we know people's party affiliation based on their voter registration data, but we don't necessarily know sort of how they identify politically, whether they're conservative or moderate or liberal, how they think of themselves. But what I would say is I think a lot of the people who sort of don't believe these types of statements may be more on the sort of conservative spectrum because they're just naturally inclined to sort of say, you're saying things about government, that I generally am skeptical of. And so, if they're going to say they've cut their workforce and are saving money, show me the proof, as opposed to I'm not going to sort of just take that on face value if they don't already know some very specific examples of it.
And the reason I bring it up is because of when you're talking about the age groups that you said the youngest and oldest show that support. Either they don't know or they're more supportive of it, and that's why I was trying to get a breakdown is what target area do we have to look at to educate these people or not, and I was just trying to formulate in my head where to go on this. And I guess on the other one, it has to do with on the ballot measure. I know you asked, did you, in your questioning, because the ones you sampled, you put up there, You both indicated, and both of them, did you indicate an oversight committee on both of them?
Yeah, so that you can see that in the last couple lines, requiring annual independent audits, oversight by a citizens committee, public review of spending, and local control of all funds, and that's in each one of them.
Okay, was there ever any discussion of not including, or was that almost a mandatory that an oversight?
I think that's a mandatory. I mean, we work in virtually every community like this where we do these types of research, and ultimately communities that choose to go to the ballot have some form of those on the ballot. Virtually none of them go to the ballot without some degree of that.
Okay, and that would be the same with the sunset clause, is that?
Sunset clause is sort of more of a, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Some communities don't want to do it. They feel like they need to pass something, and it's going to be something that they need in perpetuity. And, the public sort of sometimes is okay with that. But sunset clauses tend to be a little more community specific. They're not necessarily always there. So, but what is sort of always has to be on the ballot, which is a state law, that the term of the tax has to be on there, and that's why that until ended by voters language is in the ballot language, in the ballot measure.
And based upon the 61% in your survey on page 21, sunset clause would almost be deemed necessary for any type, and especially in this community, if it was applied.
That's my reading right now. I suppose something could change over the next 6 months to make my opinion different, but I would say I think a sunset clause seems pretty self-evident that it's something that this community thinks is necessary.
Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you.
Let me point out one thing. One of the things we were struggling with in coming up with this ballot question was making sure we do not exceed the number of wards that is required. So there is a limitation as to how many wards that you can include in this language.
Yeah.
Wards.
You're limited to 75 words.
Like your Twitter account.
Now, the difference, though, is, so what's on the ballot, this is 75 words it has to be, but you as the council would pass if you did it, pass a resolution which could lay out very broad and specific language of what you wanted the ballot measure to be, and lay out more detail of how funds should be used and how oversight should be conducted for the length of the measure. But unfortunately, we only get 75 words to talk about it on the ballot.
Kevin, any questions?
And then some comments maybe later. On the online, how did that work? Did you send them an email and then they had to respond to that?
So the way the online works is through some of our vendors, and we all have our online profiles, but we're able to get matches for people who are registered to vote. Some people now, because you can register online, they have an email address with the registrar of voters office, so we can pick that up. And anyone whose email address we had access to, we sent them a email message with a link individually for them, so they could click on it, and it would take them to a site that they would fill out the survey in, and it was their specific survey, so we knew who was taking it. Not so to provide any specific personal information, but just so we make sure it's not, we can line up who took it to make sure the right people are taking it and the answers don't get all squirrely with each other.
And they don't know that they're going to get it, it's just random?
So the way we did it is, because we don't have as many email addresses on file as we do telephone numbers still, it's sort of slowly evolving that's changing. But so anyone whose email address we had on file and we were able to acquire, they got emailed. So they had the ability to take it online, provided they didn't have some sort of filter that kicked us out. They didn't see it. They should have gotten an email from us. If we didn't get a response via email from people, we then started making phone calls. And so we made phone calls over the course of a week or so, as well as doing this online. And we got to a point where we got so many responses online, we had a sample that was pretty significant for this type of community, the size of this community, that we felt we had the data we needed to do the survey. And people in this community seem much more interested in taking the survey online than doing a phone call. So exercise that option.
Comments for later.
Okay. Another question that Mayor Pro Tem Hoffman, when he was referring to on page 11, the two categories, reforms to employee health plan and city reserves. And we have the non-applicable, or I don't know, 61%. And then I also look at that 10% number that is very inaccurate. And then the same on reserves, 58%, and then the 16%. And I think all this, to me, is coming down to further education. Now, and I know Andy can cite this chapter and verse, about our reserves are the largest in the city's history, and also all the reforms that have been made. So with that educational aspect and these two large numbers that are falling into the mistrust of the city, would that, when you bring that all back down to like on page 30, after educational statements, that 57%, does it use those numbers, or could that number go up a little greater with greater education?
I think there's certainly potential, I think, of, there's still 4% even undecided at that point. So, not that you're going to always get all 4% of those people, but there's potentially an opportunity to convince some of those people, even 2%, half go one way, half go the other. I think, those numbers, I guess sort of stepping back, sort of what we see in a lot of our research these days is there's so much information out in the public, and people have so much coming at them in various ways. I think it's hard a lot of times for people to know who's making this statement, where did it come from, how can I verify it? And I think part of it is, and maybe it's, sort of just trying to have more sort of direct communication. It's sort of the irony of we have so much that we can get online that actually the direct communication is almost become more meaningful when it happens. And it's sort of the irony of our research, which is we have a hard time getting somebody on the phone to take our surveys, but once they hear what we're talking about, their local city, they sort of go, oh wow, nobody's ever asked me questions like this. Nobody's ever sort of cared what I thought about my community, and they are willing to stay on the phone for 20 minutes or so to talk about a lot of these issues. So it's sort of, I think the challenge is getting people engaged and then sort of having a conversation where everybody's sort of listening to each other in a way that maybe it's hard to do these days, but the challenge is there, and I don't have a good solution. I'm just sort of saying I think getting people in a room and hearing what you're talking about, what the city's done, the challenges you're facing is sort of, that might be the first sort of door you have to walk through before we even start talking about changing some of these opinions.
Hang on for a second. Cheryl, do we have any cards?
No cards on this item.
Cards. If you would hang for a minute in case Corinne has any questions for you, because I see one card in the audience.
Okay.
Thank you. Would you step up to the podium, please? Good evening.
Kind of the same slides, 10 and 11, when it talks about the percentages. Here, you can have. There you go. You can do that. I'm just curious, in other surveys that you've done, how consistent is that with other cities that such a high percentage of people don't know the information?
Right. My experience is it's not unusual, particularly the more specific we get with the statements, the more you're likely to see the don't know increase. I think what's unusual here is sort of the perspective of this is a community where a lot of people have lived for a long time, and it's a smaller community. When we've done surveys in sort of like, let's say, the big cities, like Los Angeles, it wouldn't surprise me that large numbers of people don't know very specific things. But often when we're in smaller communities like this, where people have lived a long time, there tends to be a higher awareness of what's going on in your own community. I think that's sort of unique and different here. And it almost goes back even to the very first sort of overall slide, which is the fact that people are sort of divided on how the direction of the city is going was sort of the first indication to me when I started looking at this data that this is not really what we usually get out of these types of surveys. In a community like yours, with, you know, a place that's generally looks, you know, things are going well, people like where they live, they appreciate some of the unique characteristics of it, I'd expect at least 50%, maybe 65% saying right direction. There's something else going on here that suggests something's happening that people are sort of a little conflicted here, and maybe it's a lack of sort of awareness. Something's been going on the last few years where people just feel disconnected, but there's something else happening here. The state of California numbers don't surprise me at all, given, just political ideology these days is very divided. You have a state government that's basically entirely Democratic. You have a city here that's almost 60% Republican registration. So that sort of fits the story that we would expect. The direction here is a little different than we would think without sort of having any real insight before we did the research.
Anyone else?
I have comments.
Well, no, I was asking
just
the
have-
audience, Ted.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you for your time, but now,
Yeah, I
any
did,
other further
Rick.
questions?
And it's brought something up, and it goes back to the small community. We used to have a hometown newspaper here. And papers generally will vet, are pretty good about bringing both sides in to the story. And I'm looking at these numbers here with the absence of the communication, and this is based upon your experience on it, is not having that local paper or somewhere that people can get the, for lack of a better term, the unbiased or a more of a vetted story. Is that going to impact these numbers like we're seeing here? I don't have an answer, and maybe you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's another sort of, not to sort of use this as a bad pun, but it's another data point, right? That people can, I take a little from here, I take a little from here, sort of put it all together and trying to figure things out for myself. So it's an information source, and maybe, particularly if it's a local paper, you've seen their coverage of issues before, and you knew this, and I think in a way, if the LA Times covers something about the city of LA, an LA resident goes, I don't know what's going on. There's millions of people, millions of things going on. I don't know if that's a valid way to cover that issue or not. If you had a local City of Norco paper and they said something about, just using what happened, a comment earlier, about the event where people showed up, but there was some concerns about music being played too loudly. And somebody read that and said, they covered that fairly. They said, it was a great event, 9,000 people showed up, a lot of people had fun, but some of the residents were concerned about some loud noise at the end of the night. And somebody could say, that's a fair way to cover that, and maybe that sort of then says, okay, the next time I see a story in the newspaper, I'll give it it has some validity because I know they've been covering things, honestly in the past. I'm throwing out ideas just like you are, but it's certainly a viable, idea and hypothesis.
Anyone else? Thank you once again for your time.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so we have a few recommendations to discuss. Berwin? basically a receive and file. Also authorize city manager to continue to engage the residents on city operations and challenges, and provide recommendations for potential ballot measure. Unless there's just a motion to move forward.
Well, you want a motion?
I have some comments to make.
Okay.
We'll let Kevin make the comments.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah. You know, I'm struck by Cool Hand Luke Strother Martin saying what we have here is a failure to communicate. It's distressing that we have town hall meetings and the very people that called for this meeting didn't show up to this meeting and they don't come to the town halls. It's very frustrating. As most of you know, it's frustrating because when they talk about fire, we have not communicated that we did something no other city did in the state. We took down a city fire department and we brought in CAL FIRE, and we improved our fire service 100%. They don't realize, though, the mayor made the point of that 6 years ago, 7 years ago, we were paying huge amounts of money to the health funds, to the pension funds. Now they're paying their full amount. We consolidated departments. We have cut costs at every level. Part of the problem with the survey is maybe the question should have been, do you know you have your own police station? How do you like that? No other city has that at our level. Unfortunately, as a lot of people, part of my frustration is in the old days, up to 2 years ago, we had to address stuff ourselves online. And unfortunately, there's a presence online, and there was a presence in the newspaper that was so negative to everything we did. And of course, in the middle of this was Silver Lakes. We get paid $87,000, $85,000 a month for that park. That's what we get paid, and we own it. Nobody knows that. So Andy, nobody knows that 2 years ago, he began to develop Twitter, began to develop online presence, completely redid our website. And we did this when we had almost no money. And we've now, as the mayor pointed out, we have more money in the bank than we've ever had. And 3 years in a row, we have topped our sales tax numbers, setting records every year. When you drive down the street, it's frustrating. Do they not see Hobby Lobby? Do they not see Silver Lakes? Do they not see Easy Up? Do they not see that the Auto Mall is now full? Do they not see Tractor Supply? So I'm frustrated because somehow we're not communicating these things to people. They do get that we are a patch of green in a sea of concrete. We're surrounded by concrete. We are battling every single day with Sacramento. We get 1 penny for every dollar we send them. That's inexcusable, but there's nothing we can do about it. But unlike other cities, what's not being communicated is we're not putting in a truck depot so we can get short-term funds and fees. We're being selective about the businesses that are coming in. And I'm frustrated that I want to communicate. There was a newspaper article that just came out where the guy says, you're not doing any business. That's a slap in the face in every single person on this council and a slap in the face of every staff member. That is not true. Parks, Brian can tell you, we have battled to keep our parks. In terms of the sales tax, they act like, well, we didn't all spend a year. In the worst series of meetings I've ever experienced in my life, I sat there for a year with right-wing people who hated taxes, came in and said they weren't going to pay taxes. And at the end of a year, a grueling year, they said, we need a tax. And then they act like we didn't have that meeting. How do we communicate this to our residents? That the city of Norco is actually doing a lot of things that they're not hearing about. How do we get it out there? And the truth is we just have to do a better job. Now, I'm not really faulting anybody because we just got all this stuff online. We just now have to utilize it. And I'm even thinking at this point, what we need to do is hire a person or extend the hours of a person that does nothing but just shoots out stuff to the residents of Norco, to the newspaper on a daily basis, bi-weekly basis, that says we're doing this, this award happened. One of the things I want to find out is Fairfield Inn. I just found out that Fairfield Inn, if my understanding is correct, is for its size, is the #1 hotel in the entire United States for occupancy. And part of the big problem is, and Tyler, take this back to your boss, is Sacramento is stealing our money. That's what they're doing. So I think that, I think what we need to do before we, if the residents of Norco want a tax, I will fight for it. But I don't have a lot of confidence that this council can be united enough to do that, or even, I just don't know. But what I do know is until we bring up these numbers and really let people know what's going on, we're really kind of dead in the water. What I would like to see is increase our communication over the next month, get some kind of a report that says, hey, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. And every time false information comes out, I don't want to be sitting there on Facebook going, that's a lie. I want my city to fight for me. I want my city to fight for me as a resident and say, you know what, that's not true, immediately. And it gets frustrating because we sit there, we go, oh, you know, if I answer, it'll just become this long baloney. I want my city to answer immediately because we have to sit there and we have to take it. I mean, I've worked very hard on council. Berwin and I mean, we fought hard to get the things done in the city. The very things that people love, they don't realize how hard we fought for them. So my recommendation is, Andy, I really, either we hire somebody, but the next month we do a concerted effort. We see something in the newspaper, we counter it immediately. So I don't know where that recommendation goes, but you can tell I'm frustrated about this whole thing. I don't put a lot of credence in this survey because one of the mistakes I sense that we made is, even though they're experts, they didn't understand the town that they were talking about. A great example is, do you know you're the only, Eastville doesn't have a police station? All the cities don't have a police station. And as Berwin will tell you, that was a battle to keep it, wasn't it, Berwin? There were people that said, let's get rid of it. And we didn't. When we had no money, we kept it. And the citizens need to know that. Sorry for my tirade.
Ted?
I won't pound my table. I'm going to stick with what here, and let me go through. I'm for receiving and filing this thing, and I'm also very eager for the city manager to engage the residents. But I'm going to step back because Kevin, that camera I'm looking right here is looking at me. That's part of our problem. This room used to be full of people. They're not here anymore. They're watching a video at home on their leisure or at their time, picking and choosing what they watch. We get no feedback. That's been detrimental because they're not here giving us their comments. Oh, you can read them on social media, whether they're vetted or not, or their biased opinion. It doesn't bother me. I don't care. I really don't. It gets to the point where they're going to say what they want to say. That's fine. This is what's important. This is the public forum, and they don't use it. So I'm not for sending out more electronic information. We have a weekly newsletter. We have a website. We have a web page. We have everything, the Twitter account. We have been doing that. And the numbers, and I'm going to dispute Kevin because I think these numbers are true. People aren't getting the information because We have a town hall meeting, and I can just about guess everybody that's going to be at that town hall meeting that's the choir. It isn't the people we need to reach. They want us to change their city council meeting so it doesn't interrupt with another previous meeting. They want them to have them when they need to have them. It doesn't work that way. But what does work, and I'm going to go back to my years in the Sheriff's Department. Art sits back there. He does neighborhood watch. Sergeant Rowan's done a neighborhood watch. Eric, I think you probably did too at one time or another. You go to the neighborhoods. You need to talk to the people. You don't have a special meeting at a building and expect them to come, because they won't. This is a bedroom community. I sat and talked to a former councilman, former mayor, and exactly what he said. This is a bedroom community. You have to go to the people. So in our education process, we need to go back. We need to take, as a council, if this is what we decide to do, and take it back to the people. Go to their areas, split the town up, say, you got the hills, you got the bluffs. Get a hold of somebody in that area that lives there and say, I'm going to have a meeting at my house. And we're going to have a councilman there. And they're going to tell us, folks, and Kevin, I know you guys have worked very hard over the years to build up this reserve. But we just passed a budget. And we went $2 million into that reserve. Yet how many people were here that wanted to ask us questions about it? Nobody. So we need to explain it to the people why we had to do that. And how we're not in a mess because we kicked the can down the road. We're in a mess because the economy has changed. We don't control what Riverside County does with the pensions. That's eating us up. We don't control the contracts for CAL FIRE and the Sheriff's Department. Those are given to us. We don't control certain things. And I'm not picking on them because I understand the process. But the citizens and the ones that vote need to know this. That's why I asked about the education, because it needs to be done. I sat here when this was done and when the ad hoc committee was done, and I said that this council can't be trusted with the tax increase and spending the money. And I said that because it needed the oversight committee to go along with it. So I'm very firm on having some kind of an oversight, because that's how the residents trust you, the transparency. Because we already see what Sacramento does, and I'm not picking on you, Tyler. I will. Because they say one thing and they send it to another, and we've already seen that from our governor. And that's partly where this distrust has come from, that we see it up there with the percentages. They don't trust government as a whole. And unfortunately, it trickles down to us. The lack of transparency, or the lack up at the national and the state level, we're paying the price for it. But as I said before, if we're going to do this education, we got 12 months. I'd like to see something come back, and I don't want to see us throwing up a financial hardship for the city so we can get it earlier on the ballot. Let's get it and get these people educated. If we're going to put a revenue measure, let's educate the people first in their neighborhoods. We go there. We need them. And that's how we do it. So, thank you.
Robin, any final comments?
A couple of things. So from the education standpoint, if I'm in my classroom and over 50% of my kids don't understand something, it's not my students' problem. It's my problem. I didn't do my job. The results of this survey are no different. 50+ percentage of our residents don't understand how their government works for them and what we do. That is not a resident problem. That is a council and a city staff problem. We're not doing our job. So it doesn't matter what we've done to this point. We haven't reached the residents with the information that we want them to have. One thing that they do know is that Norco is unique. Norco's branded Horsetown USA? How much time and effort and money was spent to brand Norco Horsetown USA? If we just think about that for a minute. Now we think about how much time and money and effort has been spent to educate our residents on how we spend their money, what services they get, and those types of things. I'm going to guess it's going to be fairly inequitable, the amount of time and effort between those two things. And so I think if we reach out and look at different ways, I think the demographics on this I don't know is critical when we talk about Facebook. I hate to say it, but you're not probably going to reach anybody under the age of 30 with Facebook. It's outdated and the younger people are not using it. So we can push as much stuff out on Facebook as we want. We're missing a huge demographic of potential voters, huge. And so when we're pushing the information out, we have to know what demographic do we need. So we might need to go back to the company and have them break that down for us so we can see what is our target audience. Just if I'm looking at my classroom of 40-some kids, maybe I'm not reaching the students that are visual learners. And so I need to tweak my lesson a little bit. So it's the same thing with the demographics. What group are we not reaching, and how can we tweak our message so that we're reaching that particular demographic? And we need to reteach. The other thing is on this particular survey, and this will go back, in my opinion, to the transparency and honesty and trust, I'm going to guess the way the survey was pushed out, oh, we want community feedback. We're working on our strategic plan, when there was that underlying message of, oh, well, they're checking our polls, see if we want to pass a tax. So when the survey was pushed out, the messages were different. And so if you were in favor of said tax measure, oh, it's a community survey, they're just seeing what's going on and if people are happy with Norco. And if you were on the opposing team, oh, you guys, they're trying to push this tax on us. What are we going to do? Trying to push a tax. And so even going in to this particular survey, you had people that were biased already because the message was not consistent on how the survey was presented. And then that goes again back to that whole honesty and transparency and feedback. If the survey was to do a tax, then we should have just said, hey, yep, you guys are right. We have some deficiencies. We have some areas we need to work on. We're checking to see if you guys agree. And then if they came back and said no, well, then again, we're back to the education issue. I have no doubt in my mind that the residents of this town are smart enough to understand this. Quite honestly, I just think we have not reached all of the residents. I like Ted's idea of going door to door, and the gentleman even said it here. People want to talk. I think a lot of people are tired of communicating on social media. I think a lot of people are tired of going back and forth in the arguments and all that type of stuff. And if I walked to their door and had a chat with them, the input and response I'm going to get to them and from them is very different than what would happen if I engaged with them on social media or through emails or whatever the case may be. So I think it's very multifaceted, the things that we need to look at on this, the things that we need to discuss. And I think as a council, we need to either be all in and say, you know what, residents, yeah, we have a financial issue and this is what we're looking at and here's our education, and kind of quit tiptoeing around it and just say what we need to do. If we're looking for input, then that's great. It's an awesome document. Let's file and receive. If we want to move forward with a tax proposal, then that's what we need to do. We need to tell the residents, this is what we're looking to do. Here's our shortfall. Here's why we have it. This is what we're going to do. And here are the promises we're going to make to you. There's going to be a sunset clause. There's going to be oversight, all of these things. But the Norco residents are smart. They understand. And you're always going to have people that dissent. And that's the nature of it. But I think as a whole, if we presented the information in a way that they could understand and not have to spend a boatload of time. I think that's the other thing. We can give them the budget. It took me quite a while to go through the budget. A lot of people don't have time to go through the budget. but maybe they have time to watch a 2-minute video. Maybe they have time to look through an infographic sheet on the information. How you present that information is going to be super critical and important, and we need to be cognizant of their time that they can have to understand the facts and what they need to do. So that's all.
Thank you, Robin. Berwin?
Yeah, I'll agree on the educating the residents about this, other than trying to do it on social media, because if you put something on social media, then you're going to have 35 of the keyboard kings that are going to knock what you're trying to do on that. But I sat on those 2 large county commissions with several different council people from all the different cities in the county. And I know 2 of them that were having issues, financial issues, because they had their own fire department and their own sheriff, or their own police department. The first time they tried the tax measure, it failed. The second time, they got out and went door to door and talked to the residents about all this, and both times, this last time they passed and they were able to get their sales tax measure in, but it's just a matter of educating the public. And I agree with Robin, instead of trying to do it with emails and stuff like that, to go talk to them, and because they will understand it when you meet them face to face. But on a note from Kevin there a while ago about our former fire department and our sheriff's department, I feel good that we was able to swap out and trade, and we've always been able to keep that extra sheriff's officer so we could keep our substation open here. You get, I forget what the number is, but if you get so low, then they close the station and reassign everybody. But we've always been able to keep our heads above water to keep that extra officer. And I think, myself, I think that we need to really think about this and try to figure out a way to educate the people on getting this sales tax passed and putting a sunset clause on it and everything. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Berwin. Well, just a couple of closing comments, and that with what Kevin brought up about, we've done a lot of good with pension reform and our reserves, but at the same time, we have a dire need for funding for our infrastructure. And so we're going to have to try to find that balance. Robin's comments on education, and I'll leave it at this comment, is back at Easter, I went to the Easter brunch for the seniors at Clark Terrace, and there was maybe 30, 40 of low-income seniors. And this is more of the community outreach. So during the course of that meeting and that breakfast, I asked them, what would you think of a 1-cent sales tax? And it shocked me, because I thought, these are the most conservative and the most people in need. And to one of them, they just looked at me and went, our roads suck. I'll be more than glad to pay a penny sales tax. And I think that told me an awful lot at that point. So I think that what we've talked about is on these 3 items, that my question is to you, Andy. I mean, do you feel this is giving you enough direction from council?
Yeah, if I could speak to that.
Comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The recommendations here are recommendations from staff, and there are reasons why these recommendations are crafted the way they are crafted. The number 1 recommendation here is to receive and file the information, so that we know that staff, City Council has received this information and is available for public distribution if needed. The second item is to authorize the city manager to continue to engage residents on the city's operations, budgetary challenges, priorities, and opportunities. I believe the issue is not lack of information. We do provide a lot of information. When you look at the fact that most people do not understand the city's budgetary challenges and opportunities or priorities, it's not because that information is not out there. Obviously, this information gap, I believe, is because we probably have not communicated the information the right way, okay? And that's the focus of item number 2 here. And so I do recognize that. And the way we are going to approach this, I believe, is I'm going to solicit input from staff, other staff members. I'm going to solicit input from City Council. I'm going to solicit input from the residents. And I'm going to solicit input from commissioners. And if need be, then we will hire a consultant to help us hone our communication. What is it that we're missing? We go through 2 public hearings as part of our budget process. Okay? We report quarterly on the city's budget performance. We provide annually audited, very informative financial information. If I was looking for information, I know where to get it. Unfortunately, I'm not the average resident. Not to question anybody's ability to understand information coming out from the city, but that obviously is not enough. It's not reaching our residents, so we need to figure out a way to do it in a way that is understandable to them. And I believe part of that is this direct communication that the consultant talked about and that a lot of you have alluded to. And to talk about it on a small item by small item basis. This is not about information wars. I don't believe that we need, Kevin, it's not that I'm objecting to what you're saying. I don't think the solution to this is responding to every social media post or criticisms of the city.
No, I'm not talking about a social media post. I'm talking, if we have a newspaper article where we have a commissioner that is saying something that is completely erroneous, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah,
that's what I'm referring to. I'm not referring to Facebook.
If you remember correctly, there have been a few situations where there have been editorial opinions that we have strongly responded to.
Right.
We feel that information is not correctly provided. But again, it's very difficult to pursue every item out there that folks are saying, and that doesn't actually communicate our message that we need to communicate. So I think there is a communication gap. We need to figure out a way to plug that gap, and that is what we are going to be working to do over the next several months. And based on how successful we are with that, we'll get to item number 3, which is the time then where we are going to provide a recommendation to the City Council to adopt an ordinance to put a ballot measure, on the ballot if necessary. We are not there yet. That's not what the decision before you tonight is. Not that. The decision before you is again to receive and file, authorize the city manager to continue to engage as necessary. If in doing that I need resources, financial resources from the City Council, I'll come back to the City Council to request those financial resources. But we're going to start by doing what we think we can do. And then based on how well we do that, we will be coming back to you no later than March 31st of 2018 to request for you to put an item on the ballot for the citizens to decide how to fund the gap we have with respect to providing services as well as our infrastructure needs.
Thank you, Andy. I'll make a motion to accept the recommendation as written in its entirety to include items 1, 2, and 3.
Second.
Councilmembers Hannah.
Yes.
Grunmeyer.
Yes.
Bash.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Hoffman.
Yes.
Mayor Newton.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 7, City Council, City Manager, Staff Communications. Kevin?
You know what, I'm going to cover these. I would like to find out about Fairfield, but I'll call you about that tomorrow. These other things I'll deal with later. I'm wondering, Mr. Mayor, New York City police officer was killed today, and I'm wondering if we can close our meeting in honor of her. Her name is Miosotis Familia. She was essentially assassinated in a sitting in her unit. Her name is Miosotis Familia, so maybe Officer Familia, if possible.
That'll be fine, and I'll just hand that back to you, since I won't be able to pronounce that correctly, Kevin.
All right.
Ted? Thank you. Robin?
I'm not done. I just had to push the button. Based upon Mr. McFarland's statement, Brian, could you include that? I know you probably did an after-action report on the Silver Lakes concert and the Muscle Kings. Could you incorporate his statements in on your after-action report, or maybe discuss further concerning that issue? I know you guys all do it. I know Eric's probably doing one too. I'd like to get all.
Yeah, we actually have a scheduled meeting coming up with operations staff from Silver Lakes and our operations staff, fire, police, and other departments.
I don't know how many other comments or concerns you've had on the same issue, but
we'll bring that up.
But just as long as that's brought up in your after action, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else?
No, I'm done.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't hit the button.
Robin? Berwin?
And I'll concur with the gentleman about the noise over there, because I live over there on the Temescal, and I've already told Brian and them I could sit in my house with my TV going and the air conditioner going and hear every word they were singing. And when a good song came up at night, I'd go out and sit in the garage and listen to it. But the noise was really, really loud. And yeah, but still, if people over there at the event can't hear, they got something wrong with their hearing. So.
Eric, I'm sorry, Lieutenant, do you have a small report for us?
Sure. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of City Council. Tonight I want to talk about the 4th of July holiday and the fireworks enforcement that we had going on. First, I would like to thank City Council, the City Manager, my partner with CAL FIRE, the City Departments that included Animal Control and Code Enforcement for helping us through this effort. It was roughly, it was over a 5-day period where we had a team of deputies supervised by a sergeant go out and provide enforcement. But before we did that, there was a lot of work that was encompassed several months and a number of hours in the planning process. And what we were looking for was a way to inform the residents about the penalties affiliated with fireworks. And we worked a number of social media outlets. There were signs posted throughout the city. There were banners posted. There were electronic signboards left at key locations at entrance points near the city, all in an effort to educate and try and gain as much public compliance as we could in a hope to reduce the amount of fireworks we had. So the educational component lasted a number of months through a number of meetings. And again, I thank you for all the support from City Council and the City Manager's Office, as well as my partner in CAL FIRE. The planning lasted a number of months, and that was because there were a lot of different moving parts affiliated with this. And I say that because a lot of people are under the impression that we can just stop fireworks from occurring. And obviously it's like crime. There is no way that that's even possible. And that's part of the challenge. Is a lot of people think that we can stop it beforehand. Well, that's why we do the educational aspect, because we want people to self-police. We want them to take ownership as part of the community here, as part of the city, and understand that there are some grave or potentially grave issues affiliated with the fireworks. So again, the educational piece was very, very important, as well as the enforcement. And we worked those avenues. And the planning, like I said, in terms of enforcement, we had a sergeant supervising those operations. So what I've done, instead of hearing me talk about it, is here's somebody that was actually out there handling the calls for service and dealing with the challenges. I'd like to have Sergeant Rowan address that.
Good evening. Like the lieutenant said, we did 5 days of enforcement. We went from Friday the 30th of June to Tuesday the 4th. We worked 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. We had one sergeant, 2 to 4 deputies, and at least one person from city staff, either code or animal control. The protocol that we set was that all fireworks calls were dispatched to a deputy, and they were all investigated. I'll kind of give you a brief rundown of the activity. Friday, no calls at all. Saturday, we had 3 calls. Sunday, we had 4 calls. Monday, we had 4 calls. I'm sorry, Sunday, we had 2 calls. Monday, we had 4. Yesterday, the holiday, obviously the biggest night, we had 24 calls, resulting in 6 citations. So 33 calls total over the week. We were working zero tolerance, so there was no warnings. Excuse me. No warnings given. If we caught you, you got a citation. Those citations range from 1,000 to 2,000, depending on the type of fireworks. Safe and sane, $1,000. Dangerous, 2,000. So basically, if it goes in the air, it's a dangerous firework. The highest concentration of fireworks were Norco Hills. Probably the second highest concentration in the bluff areas, over towards River, Second, Corridon, that area. Nothing, maybe 1 or 2 calls over on 6 on that side of town, but by far I'd say Norco Hills was the highest concentration. All the citations were city administrative sites. They weren't criminal sites that were sent in for court or prosecution. All the citations that were issued were on-cited by deputies or city staff, so either animal control or code enforcement. So we didn't cite anybody from a resident observing fireworks. That gets us to the area, but we're not issuing people citations based on, second-hand knowledge or this is the person that did it. So essentially what happens is the call gets us to the area. We kind of slowly converge, pinpoint where it's coming from. Once a deputy observes the violation, then a citation is issued. So I know there's been some misinformation that there was warnings given or that the wrong person was issued a citation. This isn't true. Every violation that resulted in a citation was witnessed by city staff or a deputy. A lot of the calls we received were actually coming from outside the city of Norco. So Corona was having a pretty good fireworks show in their neighborhoods on the other side of River. We got quite a few up in Riverside. Eastvale had a pretty significant amount of fireworks going off, and so that generated calls from residents that bordered those neighborhoods as well. So obviously we're not going into other cities enforcing those issues there. I think that's about the gist of it. If you have any questions or comments, I can take those.
Any questions?
Justin, on the when they did the online reporting, did you guys get those calls for service, or did they get lost in the queue?
Working with city staff, we were getting some. So when Code was out with us, they were getting some online reports from the city side, and then we were also getting online reports from the sheriff's side. So the sheriff's department was dispatching those through dispatch, and then when we were working with code enforcement, he was getting those directly off his phone and then giving us that information.
So what, do you think there's a big delay or a loss of information from the online reporting? I know that if people called, they were referred to the website to make the call. I was just curious to see, make sure we didn't lose those.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, we are not directly monitoring the city website, so that information is kind of relayed to us. So
Well, this would have been the sheriff's website.
the sheriff's website was coming through dispatch, so
You got all those then?
yeah, those were coming through like regularly dispatch calls, but it would just say online report. So a lot of calls are generated from one resident, or one residence, as you know. So, we might get 5 or 6 calls, and it's not that there's 5 or 6 different locations. It's just 5 or 6 residents are calling about one particular place. So we use that to kind of, pinpoint it. It's not as easy as just having the call and then going there. You can't just receive a call and drive to the area and find the firework. A lot of it's hit and miss. So if it's like a one and done, and they run in the house, we all converge, wait a couple of minutes. If nothing happens, another call comes out, and then we go to that area. So it usually takes a little more consistency from the violator to kind of help us, pinpoint where they're coming from. So it's hit and miss.
So in the calls for service, were they generally the fireworks call, or were they the 415 noise calls too? Did you get those?
They were all fireworks calls.
So you didn't get, I'm just trying to, for the calls for service, because how people report it, either it was a noise call or fireworks call, but yours were
Yeah,
all
we
fireworks
didn't have any fireworks calls that were generated as like 415 noise calls. So we had some shots calls that were actually fireworks, but all the calls were properly generated by dispatch.
So the 33 calls for service were generally just the fireworks or shots or okay, thanks.
Which was pretty low on the spectrum. I mean,
yeah, it is.
The surrounding cities were much busier as far as calls for service. So I think some of the education helped out quite a bit.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you.
Eric, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, just want to thank you and staff and city staff also. I think we made great measures with our communications this year, and know how much you all put into it.
And I appreciate that, and also I want to make sure Brian gets credit for all the assistance he provided as well.
Thank you. Well, let's move on to Fire Chief, 86% approval.
Keep the 86%, so we'll stay.
All right. Gina. Good evening.
Good evening. I just want to let you know that our new accounting manager has started her job here and is doing a fabulous job, and that we're looking forward to bringing her to a future council meeting for you to meet.
Good. Thank you. Brian?
Concerts in the park Friday night. The Eagles, so will be the theme.
Not to interrupt, Ted, that's...
I remember that?
Yeah, you're the MC.
Dress appropriately.
It's supposed to be a warm night, so yeah, be comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Hi, Alma. Okay, Chad? Cheryl? Andy? Kevin, would you adjourn the meeting?
Adjourn the meeting in honor of New York Police Department Officer Miosotis Familia, who was shot today.
We're adjourned.